The Iron Tide has washed over Azeroth, bringing about many significant changes to the game as we know it. We have seen changes to our gear, changes to our classes, and even changes to our beloved Hallow's End event. And while some players have taken to the front lines out in Blasted Lands and others have explored the new revamped Upper Blackrock Spire, I've taken the past couple weeks to level up some alts, and I have noticed some pretty significant changes to leveling and questing. You hear a lot of talk about the stat squish and the item squish, but you don't hear a lot of talk about the EXP squish. To sum it up, the amount of experience you need to level up has been greatly diminished across the board, but so has the experience that you get from turning in quests, killing mobs, and completing dungeons. In general, leveling hasn't changed all that much. If anything, it might be a little bit faster, especially in the later expansions, most significantly in Mist of Pandaria, where a lot of people are hitting level 90 before they reach the Half-Hill Market. But there's a reason why that's happening. In the past, the amount of experience you got in the next zone would always give you more experience in your current zone. For example, if you were questing in Elwynn Forest and you reached level 10, you would always immediately drop the quest that you were doing and move on to Westfall, because the amount of experience you would get in Westfall was significantly more than the experience you got in Elwynn Forest. But that's not really the case anymore. There is still an increase in quest experience from zone to zone, but it's marginal at best. Which means now, if you're in Elwynn Forest and you reach level 10, but you want to continue questing there because you want to finish the story, or maybe you just like it there, go on ahead. You could move on to Westfall and it will give you a little bit more experience, but it's not all that significant. At the same time, if you choose to stay in Elwynn Forest, it won't feel slow at all. So it's completely viable to hang out in a zone a little bit longer than you used to, and this is the case across the board. You won't want to move on until you really start to notice yourself out-leveling that zone. This is even the case when moving from one expansion to the next, where in the past, the most significant increases in experience were found. For example, Burning Crusade always gave more experience than Vanilla, Wrath gave more experience than BC, and so on and so forth. But that's not the case anymore. Experience earned from one expansion to the next is completely ironed out. I noticed this on my level 85 Warlock, where in Deepholm, quests were giving me about 12,400 experience, but in Jade Forest, quests were only giving me 13,000 experience. That's not that much of an increase. In fact, I was halfway through level 85 before I even made it to Jade Forest because I was still doing quests in Deepholm, and it wasn't slowed down one bit. The only reason why I moved on to Jade Forest is because I wanted to see how much more experience I would get. I could have just as easily continued to quest in Deepholm, which isn't even the final zone in Cataclysm. The point I'm making is that leveling from zone to zone feels a lot more smooth than it used to. I don't feel rushed anymore. I can take more time in zones that I like, and even in some cases skip zones that I don't like. Since the patch, I have leveled alts at many different stages in the game, and I feel like this is the case across the board, and I couldn't be happier. But this isn't the only change. There are also significant changes to dungeons and how you earn experience from them. There are still quests that you can find in dungeons, but the amount of experience you get is no more than the amount of experience you would get from a normal quest in a zone at the same level. And you still get bonus XP for completing a dungeon through Dungeon Finder, but both the quests found in dungeons and the Dungeon Finder bonus feel a lot less significant than they used to. But don't count dungeons out yet, because they still offer a lot of experience. When you start a dungeon now, you will notice that they now have objectives similar to the objectives from scenarios. Upon completing these objectives, you get a boatload of extra experience on top of the experience you get from completing the dungeon. Some dungeons, usually ones with optional bosses, have bonus objectives that give you even more experience. So to get the most experience from a dungeon, you're going to want to do all the objectives before you finish that dungeon. Otherwise, the amount of experience you're going to get is not all that significant. There were times when I would get a complete level just by finishing a dungeon and doing all of its objectives. That's not including the amount of experience I got from killing bosses or turning in the quests. In other words, if you don't do all these objectives, you're pretty dumb. The good news is, most of these objectives are nothing more than killing the bosses that you would have normally killed anyways to complete the dungeon. And to make this even better, the dungeon objectives and the bonus experience is repeatable, which means that you can do the same dungeon and get the same bonus every time. Which means that the philosophy for doing dungeons once just for the quests is out the window. You can now do the same dungeon more than once without even caring about the quests in them and get tons of experience. So overall, I am more than pleased with the changes to leveling, experience, dungeons, and quests. It's a good time to be an Altaholic. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that like button, or even the favorite button. And if you found it informative, perhaps you'd like to inform your friends by sharing it with them. And don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see future videos on this channel. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, this is Kephas, until next time.